Welcome to the Bible Live with Stacy and Soapy Dollar, a show that goes deeper into the Bible, verse by verse, page by page, and book by book. Each Sunday, Stacy and Soapy go over the past week's reading from the website, thebiblelive.com, and discuss the meaning and answer questions from you. If you have a question, email the show at soapy@thebiblelive.com. Now join us as the Bible Live. Here's Stacy and Soapy Dollar.
Well, hello. It's good to be back. It's been a couple of weeks.
Well, it's been 2 or 3.
2 or 3. We missed Romans.
Yeah.
How could we?
Got all those traveling done and so on.
A lot has happened. VBS happened.
Yeah.
Let's see. A trip to Amarillo.
Amarillo by morning.
Up from San Antonio. We went to the Big Texan. It was very exciting.
Oh, does everybody know what the Big Texan
home of the free 72-ounce steak. All you have to do is eat it in an hour.
It's 72 ounces.
Yes, and the record holder is this housewife named Molly, I think, Schuler, 125 pounds. She ate 3 of the meals in 20 minutes. 3 72-ounce steaks. And it's not just the steak. You have to eat the meal. So it's the steak, a shrimp cocktail as an appetizer, a baked potato, and a salad. And I'm not sure if there's a dessert, actually. I don't think,
Well,
I think that's just too much.
Really?
Yes.
It's a female.
Can you believe that? And I mean,
126 pounds.
No, well, not 100. Oh, right. Yes.
Before she ate.
126. She weighs 126 pounds, and she ate. So a 72-ounce steak is about 4 pounds. She ate 12 pounds worth of steak alone. The guy, I talked to the waiter about it, and he said, yeah, she didn't chew. She just swallowed whole, and she was fine. In fact, I think
she was fine.
She was fine. I know. I said, was she okay? I mean, he said, yeah, that's what she does. I mean, she's like a competitive, yes, and she she was fine. I think if this is correct, the restaurant did cut her off also after 3. So she evidently could have kept going, but they're like, no. I don't know if that's because they didn't want more, steak to go out the door, or if it was dangerous.
So if you go to Amarillo by morning, if you go through Amarillo on the way to
Colorado, a lot of people.
We call Colorado
North Texas.
North Texas. But if you're going up that way, you can go by what's it called?
The Big Texan.
The Big Texan.
Yes.
And try your hand at the 72-ounce steak.
My 11-year-old wanted to so bad. Like, no, Will, you're not going to.
Well, but I bet he could do it.
The record evidently of the youngest is an 11-year-old boy. So I don't know who exactly, but and they say at 1 and 10 about 1 in 10 are able to do it. So they've given away a lot of free steak, actually.
I probably could have done that at one
point
time
in your life.
my
I
life.
believe that.
Now I wouldn't even be able to get started.
Well, speaking of it was really great. We got to go by Boys Ranch. It's beautiful and looking really good. Amarillo's had a ton of rain as well, and so it was very windy. We thought that maybe Amarillo should put its hand up to compete for the Windy City instead of Chicago. It was very windy, beautiful, and Boys Ranch is doing great. Mike Pasek, he knew you, Dad, and I'm sure you would know him. I'm blanking on the last name. Sorry, Mike, if you're listening, but he's great. Has been there decades and really wonderful. Gave us a tour, and we went and saw Texas, the musical. Just awesome. Ellie, my 3-year-old, was mesmerized the entire time.
Oh, you went to see at the canyon.
Paladuro.
Paladuro Canyon.
Is beautiful.
They have a play that they put on every summer.
Yes.
What's called Summer Stock or something like that. And it's called Texas. And it's kind of a history of
this kind of a fictional family, and they started off with this could be any early Texas settler, and but it's just great. This is its 59th year.
Yeah.
And every night they do a little gift to the person who's come the farthest. And so our night, it was somebody from Scotland.
Oh, well.
So we can't compete with that.
Where is Scotland?
Where's Scotland?
In Texas.
Scotland, Texas.
Well, there's a Paris, Texas.
That's true.
Yeah.
Speaking of
yes.
this man over here,
Yes.
your father, Soapy Dollar. I was at my girlfriend's youngest daughter's baby shower in Kerrville this weekend. And so, I'm meeting a lot of the family, and I had met her mother and stepfather before. Okay. And we got to talking about who I am, where I work. And I say I work at AM 630, the word, Gasolar, San Antonio. And she was talking about, and somehow or another, my relationship with Soapy came up. I've known him for 15 whatever years. And Soapy Dollar? My girlfriend's mother. Soapy Dollar? And I go, yeah. I know Soapy from back when he was, a missionary coming so the ironic thing is her granddaughter, which is my girlfriend's oldest daughter, was one of the recruits at Lackland that knew you.
Wow.
That went to,
wow.
Yeah.
That's happening
that is
more
happening.
and more.
So it's just like, she was just like, you know Soapy Dollar?
Yeah.
I go, yeah. Wanted to get his autograph.
Is there a real Soapy Dollar?
It is funny because it's the name. It's I guess it was Mike out at Boys Ranch. I mentioned Lackland and San Antonio, and I hadn't told him. I just said my dad was a former rancher, and so he didn't know, and he didn't put it all together. And then he goes, "Oh, you must know Newman Soapy Dollar." I was like, "Yes, I do. I know him. He's my dad." But we laughed at how there really are not many Soapy Dollars, and so it is kind of one of those unique.
Yeah,
it does kind of stick.
Well, I was teaching out at Lackland. Probably now about a year ago.
Yes.
And a young man came up after the class and said, Soapy Dollar, he said, I've heard about you my whole life.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, really? He said, my grandfather was the one who led you to Christ.
Yeah.
And all my life, my grandfather and his son, I knew his son, they talked to me about some Indian named Soapy Dollar, and this was the grandson of the man who led me to Christ out at Boys Ranch.
And what was his name again? Because I was telling Mike that
my
story.
Goodness.
Chaplain Roars.
Wayne Roars,
Wayne Roars. I remembered Roars, but I couldn't remember Wayne. And what year did you graduate high school? Sorry.
1967.
I knew it. We had a 1968 yearbook, and I was looking through. I saw the Sarpolis, and we all decided it must have been 67.
Yeah.
Rats, just missed you. Anyway, you are not listening to the Soapy Dollar show. You're listening to the Bible Live. Sorry, we're a little bit on we've been out for the past, 2 or 3 weeks, I believe. We had, one of the evenings was just really stormy, to be honest. And so we stayed home and figured, what a great chance. We don't feel too bad when we are not in studio because it gives everyone a chance to just hear God's word. Get the God's word out over the
Hear the Bible live.
Yes, and which you can by going to thebiblelive.com or biblelive.com, either way. And just right there on the homepage, we have every weekday's reading. It's just about a 20-25-minute reading. Really well done. Dad gives a great intro and outro with each reading. There's always a wisdom and worship section as well, which is going to be a Proverbs or Psalm reading. And then I love the reading schedule. We went ahead and had read, instead of being in studio, Romans. We finished Ezra, finished Romans and finished Nehemiah and Esther. And so
yes.
we covered a lot while we were gone. We'll go ahead and this week we're going to kind of rehash and talk about Nehemiah and Esther primarily. And then we'll be going into Corinthians, and so that's exciting. We'll go back to Paul's, you had Romans, and so we'll continue with Paul and Corinthians next week with the readings. But we're really happy to be back. Summertime. Hope everybody's doing well and adjusting to new sleep hours. I think that's our household. We're sleeping in a little late, but that's
Talking about living in eventful times.
Oh, my goodness. Yes, of course. Right. Yeah.
And, I said Israel was not the center of the universe.
Right, just before we came on, we were talking about that.
Yes. They call it sacred history, the history of God dealing with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and then they're going to Egypt, and then Moses bringing them out of Egypt and go back to the 40 years in the wilderness, then going back into Canaan, the promised land, under Joshua, some years of battle, and then 325 years at the time of the judges, and then we start the time of the kings in about 1,050 years. 1050 before Christ.
If I can just get to 1050, then it's all downhill from there.
40 years it's Saul, 40 years David, 40 years Solomon, and then in 930 the kingdom divides. Rehoboam stayed with Judah. Jeroboam takes the 10 northern tribes away.
And just as a side note, and that's it. I think that's always so fascinating. That's pretty much the end of Israel at least as a united, well, I guess Israel technically existed, the 10, at least northern tribes, known as Israel until Assyria. So that's 722. So it really only lasts for about 330 years.
Jeremiah had prophesied that after 70 years in exile, and we think of that as probably starting about 586 with the
destruction.
I can't say that. Destruction of Israel under Nebuchadnezzar until 1015. And that's when, you remember, Cyrus the Great.
Sorry, you mean 515.
515,
yeah,
I'm
586
sorry.
to 515.
The Persian king Cyrus, Jeremiah had prophesied that an emperor named Cyrus, by name, would allow them to go back, and that's what happened.
And what's even more impressive about that is that Cyrus was not even Babylonian, which at the time when Jeremiah was prophesying, he was saying Cyrus, and so at the very least, people might have thought, well, it'd be a Babylonian Cyrus. But no, this was like how many empires later? 2 or 3 kingdoms later. Cyrus, the Persian.
Cyrus was a Medo-Persian.
Medo-Persian.
And so we talk about history at times, just give our listeners a way to see and visualize, because this is the biblical narrative followed from Abraham, starting in Genesis 12, 11 and 12. You start with Abraham, and it follows all the way to Malachi, who is one of the prophets, the post-exilic prophets. So, well, that gets it. Yeah. But now Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther, they come on into the scene during the time of the exile under Xerxes, Artaxerxes, Darius.
Well, not Ezra probably, but Esther.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Esther's story happens during the exile, which I just think is always so fascinating. It's just kind of this little, it seems like it's a little, kind of like Ruth. Ruth is happening during the time of Judges, just this little sweet story in the middle of all this chaos. Well, Esther, it's a pretty big story, actually. And so it's not this like little sweet nugget. It's a big deal. But you don't realize this is happening while Daniel is in the, which is maybe, in fact, I think I remember reading somewhere Jewish tradition in terms of their kind of history and record keeping. They think maybe it was actually under Artaxerxes during Esther's time that Haman might have actually had Daniel killed.
Yes.
I don't know if that's, but because there is no mention of Daniel at all in Esther.
He wasn't a prophet per se. Yet he was. Yes, he was. He had a long life. Yeah. He lived under 5 emperors.
Right.
And influenced greatly all of those empires. Mm-hmm. It was Isaiah who predicted Cyrus. It wasn't Jeremiah. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Isaiah predicted Cyrus, and that was 150 years before Cyrus was born. He told that he would come along. It's so fascinating, sacred history, and how God was moving. All that time, the human race was expanding. Mm-hmm. And you get into we can trace the history of China and the East and so on.
Right.
Alexander.
And you were talking about the difference between sacred history or just in terms of a terminology.
The terminology.
But sacred history and classical history, I think is what you dubbed it. And it's, I think, one of my favorite things is when you kind of cross-reference those and you're looking at kind of biblical history, studying sacred history, using biblical text, while at the same time pulling dates from just classical antiquity, classical history, and like what's going on in China when all of this is happening. It's really neat.
It's kind of amazing that, you're right. Mm-hmm. It even, God is still at work today.
Absolutely.
But we're in the harvest time, with the time of the kingdom. God's word and God's redemptive plan is playing out around the world.
I like what you said, right? You were talking about how being a missionary with Campus Crusade, there's all these kind of wars and things that are happening, and yet as believers, you're able to talk with missionaries that are in Ukraine and in Russia, that are, working with, Iran and in Israel, or with, all over.
They're God's people, our brothers and sisters. In every continent, in every tribe, every nation, there are people. David's prayer in the Old Testament has come true.
Psalm 22.
And we're in the time of harvest, the time of the kingdom. Jesus said, all power, all authority had been given unto me. Go therefore into all the nations. And so that's the time we live in.
That's interesting when you say that. What that reminds me of is also the same Genesis commission. Be fruitful, go, be fruitful and multiply.
Yes.
And they didn't they weren't, I guess they were fruitful, but they did not, they coalesced and they strategized and tried to build this Tower of Babel, and God said, okay, I'm going to have to disperse you my way, and he confused the languages and forced them to spread out, multiply, fill the earth.
He had to do the same thing to the church.
Right.
Jesus told them, spread out, but they didn't. They stayed right around Jerusalem.
Right.
And so God allowed
Right.
persecution to come along. They began to persecute the church. Saul, who became Paul, was a leader. And so that forced them out of Jerusalem to Judea, Samaria, and to the othermost parts of the world. Yeah.
Oh, that's neat.
It's just God's plan for humanity is just so beautiful and powerful. He's calling out a people for himself.
Yep. I will be their God, and they will be my people.
82 times that's quoted in the Bible.
I'm always tempted to say that's a dadism, but it's not. It's a Bibleism.
I will be the God, and they will be my people. And he's calling out people today. Well, let's talk about what he did in the time of Ezra. Ezra was famous. If you read the book of Ezra, first place, Ezra was famous because he loved God's word. He loved the word of God. And Ezra wrote a number of the Psalms. There's a group of Psalms that Ezra wrote. But he left, and his primary he was a priest. And he was interested in rebuilding the temple, the place of worship, and so that was Ezra's focus was that, and he preached to the people. The famous scene, I think, in the last chapter of the last book, the last part of Ezra, is where he's preaching, and it's raining, and the people are crying. They're so touched and he's calling them to repent because they had begun to intermarry with pagan people out, not in the faith. It wasn't a racial or ethnic thing. They were getting drawn away from their worship of God because of their compromise in that and really what that goes to show is how fundamental and basic the marriage relationship is. When two people become one in marriage, they become powerful influence on each other's life. And so God had always told them, don't marry outside the faith. And nowadays we kind of think of that as a mandate, don't marry outside of Israel, the nation thing. That wasn't it. Because there were many believers that are part of Israel. Ruth, Rahab,
one of the
and
most,
so on.
one of the only really loved story marriage, Ruth and Boaz. She was not.
She was a Moabitess.
She was Moabitess, but so, that was absolutely ordained and
but she had converted.
But she was of
she
the faith.
Told
yes.
What was Ruth
Naomi. Naomi.
No, what's that name? Naomi. Yeah, I guess so. And she said, "Your people will be my people. Your God, my God." You know, she voiced her conversion to follow after the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So that's what Ezra is all about, the rebuilding of the temple, restoration of the worship for the people of Israel there.
Yeah, it must have been, what a time to be writing. It probably would have felt very historic, very, and I think that I think one of the themes that I've often, with Ezra and Nehemiah in those books, I think there was this big expectation on that time, because this was it. This was they're going back, they're rebuilding, and I think there was a lot of expectation on what God was going to do, how and then there is a little bit of a sense of it didn't pan out. It wasn't happening how they thought it was going to happen. So it's really interesting to read them and encourage to stay the course, though. Stay faithful. God, He is working. He is moving. Remember.
And that's what Ezra and Nehemiah were all about. Yeah. We're going to finish.
It's a good book for our time, for now, for us, that expectation.
Okay, and then, so when we come back, you're going to tell them about the story and the focus of Nehemiah.
Sounds wonderful.
Okay.
All right, stay with us on the Bible Live. Here's our first break. We'll see you after this.
He's the lily of the valley. He's the bright and morning star. He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul. He all my grief and tongues to sing my great Redeemer's praise. The glories of my God and King, the triumphs of His grace. My gracious Master and my God, assist me to proclaim, to spread through all the earth abroad the honor of Thy name, the honor of Thy name.
Oh, that's
Jesus, the name that charms our fear, that bids our sorrows cease. 'Tis music in the sinner's ears, 'tis life and health and peace. He breaks the power of canceled sin and sets the prisoner free. His blood can make the foulest clean. His blood availed for me.
Barry, did you choose this?
Availed for me.
Beautiful song.
Welcome back. It's the Bible Live, and it's a short break. I like, I always love having that worship music coming back in. Maybe speaking of, that was, I was just telling Dad during the break, it is kind of funny because once you do get these dates down, you start to really see it everywhere. And I did Sunday school kind of, I had like the preschool this morning at church. And David, and just kind of, he played his heart. Even though he was anointed, Saul was still king, yet David honored God and didn't, it was in God's time, and he worshipped him with music. And this worship music just reminded me of this morning, David. But I will say, in the middle of the lesson, I was like, so you see, Saul became king in 1050 A.D., and then it's just 40 years between. I stopped myself.
How old were they?
What I did instead was, now how old are each of you? Just to get them thinking of years. But I think
how old were they?
3 and 4. Ellie was in the class.
Well, I guess it's never too early to get down the
get those dates
biblical
down.
history. It's wonderful.
Yeah, but I sometimes we don't, because we're going through the meat of some of these Ezra and Nehemiah, that we sometimes don't talk about as much the wisdom and worship time of the reading. But it is always just so beautiful, and I love the music, Dad, that you always choose for the readings. And so again, thebiblelive.com or just biblelive.com to listen to the readings, have a really great intro and outro that gives context. And then also you have it set to, you always play really beautiful worship music.
And by the way, if you would join us this week. Let's say Monday. We're going to be starting Corinthians this week. Yes. You will make, in 1 year, you will have gone through the whole Bible.
Yes.
You'll be coming back to Corinthians again. So we read through the Bible every year, and here we get to talk about it and kind of explore the Bible, learn more in depth about each book. But there's no substitute for actually reading and hearing the Word itself. Those stories, those details, they're so full and they're so meaningful and helpful to us today in our relationship with God. So join us on the internet, on the Google. Go to thebiblelive.com.
As a baby boomer would say. Just kidding. Or on Spotify, by the way. You also can follow The Bible Live on Spotify. And so that's nice because it just prompts you each day when a new reading is up. And so that's a great one as well. But Ezra, we were just finishing up kind of our recap. Not too much did we say about Ezra. I think you mentioned, and that is one of the sweetest things, just looking at the questions reminded me of that part, when he was getting reports back that they're falling into that same old pattern of intermarrying with people, with other people groups that didn't follow God, that did not love the Lord their God, and it broke his heart, and he wept. And then he, was praying and pleading about it. And in that prayer, he says, we. He includes, even though he had not been a part of that, it reminds me of Moses in terms of just that leadership, just deeply cared about his.
And Daniel did the same thing. They identified with even the sinfulness of their people, although they hadn't participated, but they identified. It's really beautiful to see. Ezra, a characteristic of Ezra and Nehemiah is prayer, especially Nehemiah. 12 times in the story of Nehemiah, he detailed the story of how he told Emperor Artaxerxes about the walls are down, they've been destroyed, and and the king, he's crying because he gets this news from friends who come back from Israel, and he's crying, and the emperor said, "Why are you crying?" And when the emperor says, "Why are you crying?" you better have a good reason, because they don't want the cupbearer to be crying. They want him to be a gesture. They want him to be happy and laughing, but he says a prayer. Immediately, the emperor said, "What's wrong?" And immediately he says a prayer. 12 times in the book of Nehemiah, he interrupts in a given moment the situation.
Right. Hold on real quick. Hold on, I'm going to pray.
I got to pray, yeah.
Hey.
And it's beautiful in that sense. That's one of the great lessons we can learn from Nehemiah.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to try and say this. I always try to say this, actually. I mean, I often do, and I never say it. I rarely say it well. But one of my professors mentioned, when it comes to prayer, sometimes we think we don't have time to pray. Like, it's so hard though. I don't have time to pray. And he goes on this long kind of philosophical thing. But at the end of this paper, which it's awesome, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, he says, you don't have time not to pray. Prayer is one of those things that does not exist in time. Prayer is actually outside of time, and when you participate in prayer, you have a chance to step outside of time as well, to transcend it. And he equates it to, this is Peter Kreeft when he's talking about time and the setting of a play. We often think that the setting of a play, like the set contains the play. And he's saying, no, that's the play is bigger than the set. In fact, the play contains the set. It determines what the set is. It determines, and he says, we tend to think of time containing prayer, but in reality, prayer contains time, and prayer is bigger than. And so maybe Nehemiah maybe he was the original Peter Kreeft.
Yeah.
He, hold on, King Artaxerxes. I'm going to just pray real quick, and but anyway, you can always take that. You don't have time to not pray.
12 times he breaks into the story of. And Nehemiah, you want to tell them what is Nehemiah about?
Yes, and so Nehemiah, here they had been back in Israel, and for how many years? I mean, this was at this point. At least they had been able to return, and with the intent of rebuilding the wall, and they just aren't able to do it. And that's why you're saying he's getting this news back that they haven't been able to, and he's heartbroken about it. And finally he gets permission to go down and to lead them in rebuilding the wall. And he does it in 12 days, something crazy. He does it in a matter. He gets it done. Yeah. And so he's really, in terms of leadership and just his ability to motivate and he's and I don't know why I'm referencing Moses a lot, but it reminds me again kind of Moses and in moving a people group and getting them moving and going.
They're coming back. God had promised that he would restore the people to the land, and God keeps his promise. He's restoring them to the land. And about Nehemiah,
52 days, by the way. It took 52 days, and he did it.
I think that might have been the temple that you're referring to. I'm not sure. No, you're right.
The wall builder.
He completely rebuilt the walls around Jerusalem in 52 days. Wow.
Yeah, which, we don't necessarily, I say this actually. I was like, we don't think much of walls these days, but actually that's been a pretty big conversation the last 10 years in our politics.
That's right.
A wall. So,
we're building that wall,
right? Yeah. But I guess actually in our kind of most recent history, we can see the benefits of a wall. But prior to that, we can also see the heartache of walls. Of course, we think of the Iron Curtain and tear down that wall. And so it is an interest. It can become I think a wall is not a simple, easy thing.
It can keep people out, but it also can trap people in.
Right, depending on the intent of it. But I think it's a Tim. I'm sure there have been many sermons on walls, but a wall in that day was protection. It was everything. If your city didn't have a wall, you're just completely vulnerable. You're not really a city anymore.
That's what I was going to ask you. What was the problem? Why was it difficult under Nehemiah?
Right.
What are some of the problems they had to deal with in order to get the job done?
Right. Well, they kept getting. It was just a fluid environment, a fluid city. There was no, in terms of, I don't know if I.
Yeah, there were people all around them who didn't want that to happen.
Right.
And so they wrote letters back and said, hey, you got to put a stop to this because they're doing this and this. And the emperor said, oh, wow, they're building a wall on the city. They put a stop to it. And then another emperor would read in his records, oh, we gave him permission to go. Yeah, go ahead, you can do it. And so they had to deal legally, militarily. They were under attack. They had to build with a tool in one hand and a sword in the other because they could be attacked at any time. So it was not an easy task, but like you said, 52 days they rebuilt the wall around Jerusalem and had at least that protection. Mm-hmm. And they began then to populate the city.
And that's what I know in the readings, this was early in the week, I think it was Monday's readings, you go through the numbers, and I'm sorry because I should know. I think you said, though, at this point it was about 50 to 60,000 that had returned.
Yes,
at least at first.
At first, yeah.
And so that with Ezra, and so Ezra's writing as they're trying to do that, and Nehemiah is writing as they're trying to reconstitute, trying to reestablish, and so I guess, and then they grew from. That's a pretty good size. I mean,
yeah,
50 to
they
60,000.
had to, of course, they had to eat. They had to distribute the food. Mm-hmm. They had to organize the crews for who's going to put up the gates, who's going to be, putting in the walls and so on, the bricks, the stones. There were so many problems they had to deal with, but it was not just a building project, building the walls, but building the nation again, giving them the structure. That's why it was so important that they come back, the temple gets built. Right. That is a fundamental part of their society, of their culture, was that worship God at the center. And then you had to add all the other commerce and...
Right. This is probably one of the books that gives us, I'm just thinking out loud here, so, but gives us the biggest insight into what it is to be kind of, in the world, but not of the world kind of thing. There's even a moment when Ezra is embarrassed to ask the king to go back to him, for help. I think it's military help with just protection, because he had told the king that God would protect them. Yeah. But he goes to in other words, and it's Cyrus who sends them back. And it's kind of a really clear, God's people who love God, trust him, obey him, who are following him, Ezra and Nehemiah, while working in a world that doesn't necessarily. Yeah. That isn't Cyrus, Artaxerxes. And then, of course, in the middle of all of this, we say there are about 50, 60,000 people that return. Well, that's because of Esther, probably. There would not have been that many people if the story of Esther hadn't happened right in this time as well. And so you see, people who know the God of the Bible, who love him, who are living to honor him, but living and interacting very much in exile in a world that does not know him, and yet is not completely hostile to him. You see some people really respond. In fact, Nebuchadnezzar himself, it's kind of is he going to be in heaven someday or not?
And
we don't.
Cyrus too.
Cyrus as well. And so it's interesting.
And behind it all, remember, Daniel.
Yes, and then there's Daniel.
He was in 5 empires.
Right.
Daniel was a high influence over 5 emperors of that period. And
Who do we
it's
have?
just amazing the influence for the one true God.
Right.
Monotheism, worshiping one God, that was a standalone. No one did that. All the men, they made up gods. They had many gods and made them up so that they can control people under them and so on. And yet there was this one little island, one little people group that worshiped one God. And they had an influence, powerful. They kept alive that vision. And that was one of the chief reasons God instituted under Abraham a people group. We think of them as Israel or Judah, Jews, so on. But they were not an ethnic group as such. What set them apart was they believed in one God, the one and true God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That was what made them Israel.
Who they could know and have a relationship with too. I think that's really unique. Just in fact, what is it? Well, I can't remember. I guess but not only is it,
honey, you can't do that.
I know.
You can't have a memory problem. Only I.
Well, it wasn't a fully formed memory.
I see. Okay.
It wasn't really a memory in the first place. But just that the unique about Israel's God was that it was one God, but then on top of it, it was a knowable God that you could actually
know him,
relate,
and that he invited us into a relationship with him.
Right.
It's really powerful. You see God moving them through this very critical time because he was reconstituting Israel, and Israel means what?
God's people.
The people of God, the people who had wrestled with the God and won.
Right, yeah.
So they knew the true and living God, and so God to get them back to Canaan and reconstituted so that 500, 400 years later, Jesus can be born of the people of Israel because that was its second purpose God had for them. One was to keep alive a vision of the one true God, the truth about God. And secondly, to be a conduit for the Messiah. They would be the people group that would bring Messiah Jesus into the world. Right. And so all of this is what part of not only details, building walls, building the temple, the altar, fighting against the enemies that they encounter, Artaxerxes and Xerxes and Darius and Nebuchadnezzar and all of them fitting into God is moving in all the empires rising and following God, and even today God is still moving in this world.
I always think of those two terms. Well, the in the world but not of the world. I mean, that's kind of the idea is that, yes, in time and space. So Jesus even, like, in the world, a literal bloodline, a DNA. He is a human baby born of Mary, in the world, but God, not of the world. And that's always, it's happening all the time. One of our pastors, when he talks about the bread and the wine,
the
communion,
Eucharist,
the communion, or whenever we do communion, a physical representation of a spiritual reality. This is a physical representation of a spiritual reality, and I love that, because it could really kind of be said about so many things, and even it's a physical reality of a physical representation. It's happening, but it's reflecting a spiritual reality, a truth that is transcendent, that is bigger.
That's right.
I don't know, but
this world is not my home. I'm just a passing through.
Yeah.
My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. And that you get more and more as you grow in the Lord. And then pretty soon you get to the point where, who is the one that said he walked with the God? Enoch. He walked with the God and was no more. And they say that the black preacher teaches and preaches. He said Enoch is walking along with God, enjoying the day, and God turned to Enoch and He said to Enoch, Enoch, we're closer to my house than yours. Let's go to my house.
Oh, that's cute.
And that's how it. And you get the way. I'm getting a little homesick for glory myself. Yeah.
Oh, that's neat. Well, there is our music. It's the end of the second segment. And so we'll take this break and we'll come back and wrap up our time on the Bible Live with Esther. Let's talk a little bit more.
Esther,
Nehemiah to Esther.
We ought to say a few words about Romans.
Yes,
as
that
well.
sounds wonderful. I'll never turn that down. So stay with us on the Bible Live.
Here begins the victory song. Here begins the good news of Jesus Christ. Prepare the way, Isaiah cried. Good news is coming. Make God a path that's straight and wide. The reign of God is near. Prepare the way of the Lord.
Sometimes on this journey, I get lost in my mistakes. What looks to me like weakness is a canvas for your strength. And my story isn't over, my story's just begun. And failure won't define me, 'cause that's what my Father does. Yeah, failure won't define me, 'cause that's what my Father does. Lay your burdens down. Here in the Father's house. Check your shame at the door, 'cause it ain't welcome anymore. You're in the Father's house.
Don't forget, the Bible Live is talk radio. You gotta
I'm just sitting here
talk.
enjoying the music.
I know it.
Sorry.
You do.
That's right. Well, welcome back. I'm sorry to interrupt the music, but you know what it made me think of, and maybe this can be our little moment to what sort of Christian, what culturally is going on around. I don't know. We saw Forrest Frank in April up in Waco. That was really neat, and then hearing that song and just music in general, and Third Day. I was always a big Third Day who is this King of Glory? You know, in that like real raspy. I liked their day. They just announced they're going to do a concert in 2026, so next spring. I thought that was exciting.
Well,
they're not coming to San Antonio,
good.
I don't think. At least it wasn't on the date, but they'll be in Austin, I'm pretty sure. So, and then we're going into the book of Esther here, and I kind of laughed a little bit because, you know, Dad was reminding in the book of Esther, you've got Haman, who is he's the bad guy.
The
He's
villain,
the villain.
yes.
Yeah, and that he is an Agagite.
Agagite.
He's an
yeah.
Agagite, which, you know, Saul had been commanded. God had told him when they were going to battle against it was King Agamemnon, right? Agamemnon? No, am I getting that all mixed up? Is that
No, Agag was the
yes,
king.
of course. Okay.
And that was
Agamemnon. I think that's Egypt.
The group.
Well, he was told to wipe them out, destroy and kill them, and he doesn't. He lets the king, the part of the royal family, actually live. But I laughed. I said, "Yes, I knew that because, of course, Samuel." But then the House of David series that opens actually with that, which is really interesting. I don't know. It's a pretty interesting series. I always say with those things like The Chosen or House of David, some of these films that are being released by Angel Studios now, you know, I love the director, the creator of House of David. From the beginning, he always says the book is better. 1,000 read the Bible. The Bible is better. This is just and it's true. It's really funny because when you do read Samuel, you know, in Kings and Chronicles, and then you and Psalms even, you know, but when you do get to know and then you watch the series, and it's just kind of like, it didn't really happen. It's not quite that case, and you really end up thinking, oh yeah, the book is better. And then but that is, I think it is it's an interesting series. I think I haven't seen a Goliath and David scene depicted as well as it was in House of David. So I recommend it.
I was trying to think of the people group that Agag was the crown. It was the Amalekites.
Right.
And Saul was commanded to destroy them. They were in war against each other, and he didn't do it. And here we come centuries later now that because he was disobedient, they have this problem here under Esther, the Haman, who is a descendant of Agag, and trying to destroy the people of Israel.
I think that's actually, we were also talking about, you know, Esther is it's a pretty popular just story, and so there's a lot of different there's I think there's what is that, Sight and Sound out of, I think it's Missouri, but it's a theater production company that does Bible stories. I think they did an Esther one, and it's real pretty. A lot of original music. It's real pretty. But then there's that movie. It's Peter O'Toole, I think, is Samuel actually, and maybe even John Rhys Davis, who's Gimli. I think it might be in it as well. But it's called One Night with the King, and it's the story of Esther. It's probably one of the more recent movies of her, and I think they actually start with that as well. The reference to Saul not killing the king, and then later, now here we have Haman.
Well, everybody loves a beauty pageant.
Yeah, that's right.
So
in the middle of all
isn't
of
that amazing?
Beauty pageant.
The idea.
It's so human.
Vashti.
Yes.
Xerxes' wife was Vashti. They were going to go to war, so they have, when it was common, when you're going to war, they have a party. It's a drunken orgy in reality, and he brings together all his generals and his commanders, and they make their battle plans. They plan the way they're going to fight the battle, but they do it in the context of a party, and sometimes that party would last months and even years, just as a plan. And
it's one way
so
to procrastinate war. I mean,
he told, they were in the middle of one of those parties, and Xerxes commands his wife,
the queen,
Jewish tradition has it that Vashti was pregnant with Artaxerxes, the son, but he commanded her to come and show up for this party, and something in the language, in the Hebrew language, kind of hints that she's not to be attired very much, not to be clothed very much, and she refuses to come, which you have to admire her. She said, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, the people complained to the emperor, boy, if your wife does that and gets away with it, all of our wives are going to start talking back to us and disobeying us. You got to do something about this. And so that's why he's under pressure to replace Vashti. And out of the blue, here comes Esther. She's just a nice, sweet little Jewish girl. She happens to be evidently very beautiful, and she wins the beauty pageant, and he brings her in to be the queen. And she is, as Mordecai is an older cousin of hers, and he works for the emperor in the palace. And the book of Esther has a lot of intrigue, a lot of inter-palace politics, and so on. But she is there for such a time as this. That's what God has moved to give you this position in such a time as this, and she is used to save Israel from slaughter.
Right.
It's just an amazing story. It really is.
And it happens.
And you were a beauty queen at one time.
Well,
You're still my beauty queen, but you surely were.
Well, it is. I love, and that was kind of the angle. And sorry, I know it's probably silly. This film, the One Night with the King, but I did appreciate this because when you read scripture, just different people's what stands out to them or what, and I think the angle that they took was what was distinctive about Esther that would have made her, and of course we know God is God is working. God is what's distinctive, and but what she brings out as someone that knows God and follows God. She is Israel, God's people, under Mordecai. She's obedient to him. She knew her scripture, and at least we assume that she does, because she does honor God. So which would have included, of course, the Old Testament and what it was written.
Sure.
And so they highlight. One of the verses that they pull out is that it's Proverbs 25:2. It is God's privilege to conceal a matter, to conceal things, and the king's privilege to discover them. I've
always liked. Is that a psalm or a proverb?
Okay. It's a proverb. It's 25:2, and It is God's privilege to conceal things and the king's privilege to discover them. And it's just that that twist, that way of looking at the world through the lens of, instead of a God that's, playing games with us in a negative, it's recognizing that God, it's his privilege, it's his right, it's to kind of play high, but it's a joy to discover what God's doing. It's a joy to go through life wondering, like, okay, what's God? Where is He moving? What is this? And I thought that was a neat and so Esther, at least I'm going a little bit. I'm going by this movie and this representation, but in general, especially at a time when it does seem just bizarre. I mean, here, she's a beauty. She's in this competition to be the queen of a kingdom that's looking to destroy her people. And what is God doing? What could He possibly be doing? But that it is our unique privilege to just by faith kind of go along, obey, and see how it unfolds, see what God's doing. And I'm sure that probably, I'm sure that probably made her unique and stand out. I don't know why I keep talking. I need to stop because we have Jacob on the line, who will, I'm sure, be able to speak to this so much better than I am. Jacob, how are you?
Well, I am a regular specimen. How are you?
I don't know if I'm regular or I'm sure.
Did you say you're a spaceman?
Yeah, see, Soapy knows the joke. When I say I'm a regular specimen, that's an Italian astronaut. A specimen.
A specimen,
Man,
yeah.
I missed it. I'm sorry.
I know all of Jacob's jokes.
Right. How are you?
Well, I'm doing okay, and I do listen, and once in a while I just feel overwhelmed to chime in. So consider this a chime.
Well, you are hearing often things that I recall from the days when we did the show together. I've recalled and remembered so many of the things that you taught me.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy that perspective that you bring to the Bible for us all. So go for it.
Well, actually, may I return the compliment before we go on? Because, Soapy, the truth is, and I'm not saying this because you're my friend and I like you, it's the truth. Soapy, you're one of the most knowledgeable men that I've ever known, that I've ever been able to talk with the Bible about. In fact, what I've always enjoyed talking with you about is I don't always have to bring you up to date with what I'm talking about. You know when I'm talking about something. Soapy, you don't get enough credit for who you are.
Oh, well, thank you. I don't know what else to say, but I would say right back at you. What do you hear tonight? What got on you?
Esther, of course, is it's one letter off from the Hebrew word, and the word, it's Hester in Hebrew, and the word Hester means hidden, and the reason it's hidden.
Well, I'll be.
Okay.
And what that's talking about is because God is not mentioned there.
Right.
Yes. So in the Hebrew version, God's not mentioned. Now, I will say, in the Catholic version, they have two different books of Esther. One is the Jewish version that doesn't mention God. And then when the Catholics kind of got a hold of it, they said, well, those silly Jews forgot to mention God. So they put God all over in there, but they're back to back, and you can read both in the Bible.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, Soapy, you're 100%. And I really want to compliment you, first of all, when you gave the definition of what Israel means. Soapy, I really want to compliment you. You were 100% right, and you're probably one of the few people I know that actually get it right.
Wow.
But I also want to say that you're right. You're absolutely right what you said about Haman being considered a descendant of the guy that was supposed to have been killed by Saul.
Yeah.
And of course he didn't. Now here is, there was a child born, because as you read the story, you'll find way back with the version of when Samuel talks to Saul, he let somebody go. That lady, and was pregnant. She regenerated the entire world of the Amalekites. The Amalekites were not just the people, but from the Hebrew, the Amalekites, Mal, is like evil. So it actually is, it has something to do with the hatred of the Jews.
Yes.
And in Jewish tradition, you're going to love this one. In Jewish tradition, their position is that Hitler was an Amalekite.
Yes. Oh,
Well,
yeah. And what was the Nazi Goebbels, or one of them as well was...
Yes, very good, Soapy.
You know, yeah, tell us that.
Yeah, sure. In the book of Esther, in the Hebrew, it doesn't, because the Hebrew doesn't have capital letters, of course, but in the book of Hebrew, when it talks about Haman's sons, his 10 sons, even though it does not have capital letters, there are the letters written in large letters, twice the size of normal, if in Hebrew. Though, and of course, in Hebrew, letters are also numbers. And that actually translates to 1947. And so it actually is when they put that actually gives you the date. So it's actually buried. It's one of the great things I love when I go up to a college class. I like to point that out because you can predict that kind of thing. Because when I put the 10, there were originally 11, but one poisoned himself. They put 10 on trial in the Nuremberg trials. They got the death sentence. When they were hung.
Yeah, at Nuremberg. That's right.
That's correct. And 10 of them were hung. The last one they hung was a guy that you're referring to named Julius Schechner, and he was an expert in Hebrew. And when they put the bag over his head to hang him, he yelled in German, Purimfest 1947. And he knew that they were all hung on that date, mentioned in Esther, on the very date Purim occurs.
Oh, my land. I remember that. Yes.
Wait, now, where does the number, in Hebrew, there's not capital, but the first letter is also a number. And so what are the numbers?
Well, all letters, believe it or not, these people had too much time on their hands. The alphabet is also a number. In Hebrew, you can add and subtract a word. So if I take a word with 300 and add 100, I get 400, which is another word. So you can create words by adding and subtracting. But in the names of the 10 sons, each one has a letter that's twice as large. Yes. And if you look, and sometime perhaps I'll show it to you, or you can look it up. But if you look in a comparison, find the English, compare the Hebrew. In the Hebrew, it gives the 10 sons' names. Well, the 10 people that were hung, that after Hitler was gone, they might be considered, in a loose sense, the sons of Hitler. But in the Hebrew, those letters are actually enlarged twice the size, so you can't miss them. Wow. And for centuries, the Jews knew it meant something, but they weren't really sure. But after they were all hung, they knew for sure because that it's a date, and it's the date. And get this, like I say, those 10 sons of Hitler, if you will, they were actually hung on the day of Purim.
Wow.
Well, you better tell us what Purim is. We haven't explained that yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no, as Stacy is correct about, that's when the Jews were given permission, believe it or not, from the king through Esther, to defend themselves, and they defeated the people who wanted to kill them. And so she declared a day of fasting and a holiday. It's quoted known in the Jewish world more or less as the Jewish Halloween, because people dress up.
I see.
And they do. And so, but it actually is a celebration, and whenever the entire book of Esther is read on Purim. And it's almost comical and fun because what happens is they read it so fast you can't keep up with it. And the kids, every time you hear the name Haman, they stomp their feet and clap their hands so you can't obliterate his name. And so, but it actually is. And if you ever want to look, and I kept notes of this, and I'm sure you recall, Soapy, because you recalled so much, but actually in the New York Times, when this all took place below the fold, because newspapers used to be folded, below the fold, it actually says what Julius Schechner said and gives all this information about those Hebrew letters. It was actually in the New York Times.
That's amazing. Yeah, I remember all of this, you having told us before about it. I tell you, isn't the Bible, isn't God's Word amazing? I mean, it's just astounding, the gift that God has given to humanity, this book that tells so many stories of people who knew God and interacted and learned things from God, and now we have the benefit of their experiences, what they learned, what God told them and showed them about himself, and we have the benefit of all of that, plus the Messiah himself, his testimony as well. This book, the Bible, is it's just amazing.
Yeah, we were. So I'm always tempted. These things are so fascinating. I'm always wanting to share them. But my Sunday school class this morning were 3 and 4-year-olds, and so it's like maybe not. Maybe I can't. But what I ended up doing instead was just, we worship him because he is worthy. He is worthy of it. He created, and it's so cool to see him flex, when it comes to just how he knows all of it. He is, you said earlier, the behind the scenes, there's Daniel, and yes. Yeah. But ultimately there's our sovereign God, yes, who is good, and he is for us. And I love what you said, Jacob, though. But there is also that reality. There is evil, the Amalekites, Mal being evil, and that's our enemy ultimately.
Well, I do hear the music, so I want to say thank you for talking with me. I love you both. You're great. And Soapy, you sound so good. You've improved so much. I'm proud of you.
Thank you, buddy.
Thanks,
I appreciate it.
It's so nice to hear his voice.
Talk to y'all later.
Good night.
Sounds good.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Jacob. Well, that was a treat. Thank you so much, Jacob. Listeners, thank you for tuning in. I've got to say, the best part of Amarillo, by the way, was that my aunts and my cousins were there. Thank you, Aunt Sherry, Aunt Janice, Vicky, David, Laura, Valerie. So good to see y'all. Love y'all.
All Suzanne's sisters have read through the Bible many times.
Yes,
and so
amazing.
I'm sometimes afraid if they listen, they might
correct us.
Oh, they're so sweet.
Yes.
And
love
they know God's Word.
The best part of Amarillo is them. All right, we love y'all. And that's the show. Come back next week. We'll talk about the Corinthians.
And Romans.
And Romans. That's right. Have a good week.
Join us next Sunday night at 5:30 p.m. for the Bible Live with Stacy and Soapy Dollar. To listen to each week's readings and past readings, go to thebiblelive.com. You can also make a gift to help support the program at the website, thebiblelive.com. If you have any questions, email the Bible Live at soapy@thebiblelive.com. Listen again next Sunday at 5:30 p.m. for the Bible Live on AM 630 The Word.